Chapter 1. You are not your mind. The greatest obstacle to enlightenment. Imagine a destitute man who has spent 3 decades sitting on the side of a dusty road begging for coins. One afternoon, a stranger walks past. The beggar automatically extends his battered cap, muttering his usual mechanical plea for spare change. The stranger shakes his head, explaining that he has nothing to give. But then the stranger points to the old, weathered box beneath the beggar and asks what he is sitting on. The beggar dismisses it, claiming it is just an empty crate that has supported his weight for as long as he can remember. The stranger urges him to pry off the lid and look inside. Reluctantly, the beggar forces the wood apart, only to stare in absolute bewilderment. The box he had been sitting on his entire life is brimming with gold. Consider this stranger to be the voice now asking you to look inside, not into a wooden crate, but into the depths of your own being. You may protest that you are not a beggar, yet anyone who has not discovered the profound wealth of their own radiant existence and the unshakable peace that accompanies it is living in poverty, regardless of their material assets. So many wander through life frantically searching the external world for fragments of pleasure, approval, and security, completely unaware that an infinite treasure far surpassing anything the world could ever offer rests silently within. The concept of enlightenment often evokes images of unattainable, superhuman mastery. The false self, the ego, prefers to keep it framed as an impossible summit. In reality, enlightenment is merely the recovery of your natural state, a felt, effortless oneness with being. It is a profound connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, a reality that is fundamentally you, yet infinitely vaster than your individual form. To be separated from this connection is to suffer the illusion of isolation. You begin to perceive yourself as a fragmented island in a hostile universe, making fear and conflict your default modes of existence. The Buddha beautifully described enlightenment simply as the end of suffering. While this definition intentionally avoids offering a rigid goal for the mind to obsess over, it points directly to a state devoid of inner torment. What remains when suffering is extinguished? That is the quiet revelation you must experience for yourself. To understand what is meant by being, one must recognize it as the eternal, ever-present life that exists beyond the countless forms subject to birth and decay. It is the invisible, indestructible essence, deeply embedded within everything. You can access it right now as your truest self. However, do not attempt to seize it with your intellect. The mind cannot possibly comprehend it. You can only know this profound reality when the mind falls completely silent. When your attention is intensely anchored in the present moment, being can be profoundly felt, though never mentally categorized. Reclaiming this awareness and resting in that realization is the essence of enlightenment. Often the word God is used to describe this, but centuries of misuse have emptied it of its vastness. It has become a closed concept, frequently reduced to a mental image of a supreme entity entirely separate from oneself. Being, on the other hand, remains an open concept. It does not reduce the infinite to a finite form. It is immediately accessible as the sheer feeling of your own presence, the pure I am that precedes any label of who or what you are. The single greatest barrier to experiencing this reality is the deep-seated identification with your own mind. This identification forces thought to become a relentless compulsion. The inability to stop the inner dialogue is a dreadful affliction, yet it is so universally shared that it has been accepted as normal. This ceaseless mental static blocks you from accessing the quiet sanctuary of inner stillness where being resides. Furthermore, this unbroken stream of thought fabricates a false self, casting a heavy shadow of sorrow and apprehension over your life. The philosopher Descartes once declared, "I think, therefore I am," believing he had uncovered the ultimate truth. Instead, he articulated the ultimate delusion, equating existence with thinking. The compulsive thinker lives in a fragmented reality, perpetually entangled in insanely complex problems. In contrast, enlightenment is a state of unbroken wholeness and deep peace. It is the end of the mind's tyranny. When you are bound to your mind, an opaque screen of labels, judgments, and concepts obscures your connection to everything, to yourself, to your fellow human beings, to nature, and to the divine. You forget the fundamental fact that beneath the surface of physical appearances, you are unified with all that is. Thinking, when operating as a master rather than a tool, acts much like a disease. Just as cells in the human body can multiply destructively when they lose harmony with the whole organism, the mind becomes destructive when it operates without the anchor of conscious presence. The instrument has simply taken over the operator. Freeing yourself from your mind. Consider what it means to be possessed by an entity without even realizing it, mistaking the possessing force for your own identity. The journey toward true freedom begins the moment you realize you are not the voice in your head. Recognizing this allows you to step back and observe the thinker. To watch the thinker is to listen to the incessant commentary echoing in your mind. This voice is constantly speculating, criticizing, comparing, and complaining. Often, what it says has absolutely nothing to do with the present reality. It is merely replaying the past or rehearsing a disastrous future. Even when it attempts to address the present, it filters every perception through the distorted lens of past conditioning. This voice frequently acts as an inner tormentor, draining your vital energy and generating untold emotional and physical distress. You hold the power to free yourself from this inner captivity right now. Start by paying close attention to the repetitive thoughts that cycle through your awareness. Listen to them impartially, without judgment or condemnation. If you judge the voice, you are merely allowing the mind to re-enter through the back door. As you observe, a distinct realization emerges. There is the voice, and here I am, listening to it. This witnessing presence is not another thought. It is an emergence of your deeper self, arising from a dimension far beyond the intellect. When you witness a thought in this way, its power over you evaporates. Because you are no longer fueling the mind by identifying with it, the thought naturally subsides. This creates a gap in the continuous stream of mental noise, a moment of no mind. Initially, these gaps may last only a few seconds, but over time, they will expand. Within these quiet spaces, you will discover a profound stillness and a subtle, radiating joy. This is not a state of unconscious trance. On the contrary, you become far more awake and intensely alert than when you are lost in thought. You are fully present. You can proactively cultivate these gaps in your daily life simply by redirecting your total attention to the present moment. Take a mundane activity that you usually treat as a mere means to an end, like washing your hands or climbing a flight of stairs, and infuse it with your complete awareness. Feel the texture of the water, notice the rhythm of your breath, and observe the movement of your muscles. By doing this, you draw energy away from the mind and ground it in the vibrant reality of the now. This practice of disidentification is the most crucial step on the path to liberation. Eventually, you will look upon the mind's restless antics with a quiet smile, no longer allowing its content to define who you are. Enlightenment, rising above thought. The intellect is an undeniable tool, essential for navigating the practical matters of existence. Yet, for the vast majority, thinking is not used purposely. It operates as an exhausting addiction. You find yourself unable to stop because you unconsciously believe that your very existence depends on the continuation of these thoughts. From childhood, you construct a phantom identity built upon personal and cultural conditioning. This egoic self thrives on the friction of endless mental activity. To the ego, the present moment is practically non-existent. It constantly reaches backward into the past to solidify its identity, or it projects forward into the future, hoping to find salvation and completion. Even when it appears to be focusing on the present, the ego only perceives it as a stepping stone to reach some future mind-projected goal. The evolution of human consciousness requires us to transcend this mind-dominated stage urgently. Enlightenment is not a regression to the instinctual level of an animal or plant. Rather, it is a magnificent rising above thought. In this awakened state, you still utilize your cognitive abilities, but with razor-sharp focus and efficiency. You engage the mind for practical tasks and then let it rest in profound inner silence. True creativity does not originate from the churning gears of the intellect. All great breakthroughs in art and science emerge from the quietude of no mind. The mind is a survival mechanism, excellent at defending, attacking, and analyzing, but it is entirely devoid of genuine creative fire. Consider the unfathomable intelligence required to construct a single human cell, an intelligence that surpasses any capacity of the thinking mind. When the intellect reconnects with the vastness of being, it stops acting as a destructive tyrant and becomes a sublime instrument, serving a purpose far greater than itself. Emotion, the body's reaction to your mind. The realm of the mind encompasses far more than conscious thought. It deeply intertwines with your emotional landscape. An emotion is the body's direct reaction to the mind. It is the physical reflection of your mental state. When your mind harbors hostility, the body instantly prepares for conflict, manifesting as anger. When the mind perceives a threat, the physical form contracts, resulting in fear. These relentless mental patterns create biochemical shifts, leaving a tangible imprint on your physiology. Often, you are entirely oblivious to the underlying thoughts driving your behavior, and it is only by paying close attention to your emotions that these unconscious patterns are revealed. The more heavily identified you are with your judgments and mental narratives, and the less present you remain as the witnessing consciousness, the stronger the emotional turbulence will be. If you habitually repress or disconnect from these feelings, they will eventually surface as physical ailments or even draw you into hostile external situations that mirror your internal state. If there ever appears to be a conflict between a surface thought and a feeling, the emotion will always reveal the truth of your current state. The thought may be a rationalized lie, but the emotion is the raw, undeniable reflection of your inner reality. To master this, you must learn to watch your emotions exactly as you watch your thoughts. Direct your attention inward and feel the energetic charge of the emotion in your body. Do not analyze it. Do not let it control you. Simply allow it to exist while you remain the silent, observing presence. Without this vigilant presence, an emotion will easily overpower you. It will hijack your identity, creating a vicious cycle where the thought feeds the emotion and the emotion fuels the thought. This cycle is rooted in a single, primordial pain, a deep-seated anguish stemming from the disconnection from your true essence. The mind tirelessly attempts to run away from this pain through external gratification, but its frantic activity only serves to cover the wound temporarily. The harder the ego struggles to eliminate the suffering, the more intensely the suffering persists. What of the positive emotions? Love, joy, and deep peace. These are not mere emotions. They are profound aspects of your natural connectedness with being. They reside beyond the dualistic nature of the mind and have no opposites. Unenlightened consciousness frequently mistakes the fleeting thrill of pleasure for true joy, and the desperate, addictive clinging to another person for true love. Pleasure relies entirely on external circumstances, and inevitably flips into pain when those circumstances change or vanish. Genuine love and joy, however, emanate from within. They are incorruptible and immune to the shifting tides of the external world. As the Buddha taught, suffering is born of craving, and craving is simply the mind frantically searching for salvation in the future or in physical forms. As long as you equate your identity with your mind, you are bound to these endless cravings and aversions. Do not seek to attain enlightenment as a future goal, for that is just another craving. Step into the reality of the present moment. Observe the mechanics of the mind and the turbulent waves of emotion without being swept away by them. By anchoring yourself in the now, you dismantle the ego's power and awaken the radiant, ever-present consciousness that has always been your true nature. Chapter 2. Consciousness, the way out of pain. This chapter delves into the origins of human suffering, explaining that the majority of psychological pain is self-created through unconscious resistance to the present moment. The author introduces the concept of the pain body, which is an accumulation of unaddressed emotional trauma from the past that lives on within us. This pain body acts almost like an independent entity, feeding on negative thinking, drama, and emotional turmoil. The text explains that the ego frequently identifies with this pain body, using it to solidify a false sense of identity. This identification roots the mind in a perpetual state of fear and drives a continuous, desperate search for external wholeness to fill an internal void. To break this cycle, the author advises cultivating intense, non-judgmental conscious awareness. By simply observing the pain body when it activates, without judging it or identifying with it, individuals can use the light of their own presence to dissolve past suffering. Ultimately, accepting the present moment as it is stops the creation of new pain and opens the door to genuine inner peace. Chapter 3. Moving deeply into the now. The problems of the mind cannot be solved on the level of the mind itself. Once the basic dysfunction, the identification with the mind that substitutes for a true self rooted in being, is recognized, there is no need to endlessly study its countless manifestations. The ego relentlessly seeks attachment to uphold its illusory sense of self, often investing heavily in personal pain and suffering. By stepping out of this unconscious identification and becoming present, the mind functions as a wonderful tool rather than a tyrannical egoic force. The key to disidentifying from the mind is to end the delusion of time, as time and mind are inextricably linked. Removing time halts the compulsive preoccupation with past and future, which are merely illusions that obscure the eternal present. The present moment, the now, is the only constant point that exists, and the sole gateway to the timeless realm of being. Nothing has ever occurred or will ever occur outside the now. The past is merely a memory trace, a former now reactivated in the present, while the future is an imagined now projected by the mind. Both past and future derive their pale reality entirely from the eternal present. Grasping this essence causes a profound shift in consciousness, moving away from mind and time into vibrant presence. Throughout history, spiritual masters have pointed to the now as the essential key to the spiritual dimension. Life-threatening emergencies sometimes trigger this shift naturally, stripping away the time-bound personality and leaving an intensely alert presence. The essence of traditions like Zen is to remain so completely present that no problem or suffering can survive. Stepping out of the time dimension allows the timeless to transform perception. The screen of the mind falls away, revealing a knowing that does not destroy the sacred mystery of life, but honors the holy essence within all things. To establish this shift permanently, one must practice withdrawing attention from past and future, catching the habitual mind strategies that seek to escape the present. Becoming a silent watcher of one's thoughts and reactions draws energy away from the mind, opening up the timeless dimension. While practical clock time remains necessary for setting goals and learning from mistakes, it is crucial not to let it transform into psychological time. Psychological time arises when past mistakes or future goals become part of an illusory sense of identity. When the present moment is reduced to a mere stepping stone, life's journey becomes an obsessive need to make it, stripping away the miracle of life unfolding in the now. The collective manifestations of psychological time reveal it as a dangerous mental disease. Ideologies that justify present horrors for the promise of a future utopia demonstrate the chilling insanity of this mind pattern. Living for the future constantly drains life of its vibrancy, leaving individuals trapped in endless repeat performances of past conditioning. The future is usually just a replica of the past, and the only place where true transformation can occur is in the present moment. All negativity, from anxiety and stress to guilt and bitterness, stems from an accumulation of psychological time and a denial of the present. The time-bound mind itself is the ultimate root of suffering. A profound distinction exists between one's life situation, which is constructed from the mind stuff of past and future, and one's actual life, which is only experienced in the now. By narrowing focus to the current moment, utilizing the senses fully, and observing the silent presence of all things, the deadening world of mental abstraction is left behind. Problems are inherently mind-made and require time to survive. They cannot exist in the actuality of the present instant. When fully present, there are only situations to deal with or accept, not problems. Creating problems creates pain. Choosing to step out of this problem-making negativity requires intense presence, which dismantles the false sense of identity built around suffering. Breaking the deeply embedded patterns of the time-bound mind is a profound evolutionary transformation. This awakening of consciousness from the dream of time and matter represents a quantum leap for humanity and is essential for survival. When the compulsive striving away from the now ceases, life begins to flow with joy, ease, and lightness. Giving full attention to the action itself rather than the fruit of the action imbues even simple tasks with love and quality. In the absence of psychological time, the sense of self derives entirely from being. Goals may still be pursued playfully, but fulfillment is found right now, complete and whole, free from the fear of loss or the desperate need to become. Chapter 4. Mind Strategies for Avoiding the Now. Even if one accepts the intellectual premise that time is ultimately an illusion, the practical reality of living in a world governed by clocks, schedules, and inevitable physical aging remains. Recognizing the illusory nature of time on a conceptual level is vastly different from embodying that truth. True liberation from time only occurs when the profound realization of the present moment permeates your entire being, allowing you to experience the vibrant pulse of life as a constant, underlying joy. The bills that must be paid tomorrow or the eventual demise of the physical body are not the true sources of human suffering. The fundamental crisis is the loss of the present moment, which equates to a disconnection from the essence of existence itself. This core delusion is what transforms ordinary situations into heavy personal burdens. Freedom from this temporal trap means breaking the psychological reliance on the past to define your identity and abandoning the expectation that the future will finally bring fulfillment. This shift in awareness is monumental. While a rare few might experience this transformation in a sudden dramatic awakening, often triggered by intense suffering, most people must consciously cultivate this state. Initially, you might find yourself constantly fluctuating between being present and being lost in time. Recognizing that you have drifted away from the current moment is, paradoxically, a moment of profound presence. Gradually, the conscious choice to anchor your awareness in the now becomes more frequent, extending the periods of genuine alertness. To understand how the mind avoids the present, it is helpful to distinguish between different depths of unconsciousness, much like the difference between deep sleep and vivid dreaming. In everyday waking life, most individuals oscillate between ordinary unconsciousness and deep unconsciousness. Ordinary unconsciousness is the default state for the majority of humanity. It is characterized by an unbroken identification with mental chatter, emotional reactions, and continuous judgments. Rather than experiencing acute agony, this state manifests as a persistent, low-grade hum of dissatisfaction, boredom, and unease. Because it is so pervasive, this background static is widely accepted as the normal human condition. People frequently attempt to mute this subtle discomfort through various means, seeking temporary relief in overworking, consumption, or superficial entertainment. However, when this fragile baseline is disturbed by a significant challenge, a threat to the ego, or a personal loss, ordinary unconsciousness plummets into deep unconsciousness. This deeper state is marked by intense suffering, triggering aggressive reactions, profound despair, and overt hostility. The way a person navigates adversity is the truest gauge of their conscious awareness. Crises either jolt an individual awake or drag them deeper into a nightmare of reactivity. Therefore, the practice of remaining vigilant during mundane, everyday situations is crucial. It builds the spiritual resilience necessary to maintain awareness when severe challenges inevitably arise. This continuous underlying restlessness has plagued humanity for millennia, long before the complexities of modern industrial society amplified it. Indigenous observers and ancient sages alike have noted the frantic searching nature that dominates the collective human psyche. There is a perpetual hunger for something just out of reach, a constant craving that breeds tension and resistance to the current reality. This collective dysfunction, rooted in the denial of the present, forms the foundation of a civilization that inflicts unimaginable suffering upon itself and the planet. The path to dissolving this pervasive ordinary unconsciousness begins with direct observation. You must bring the light of awareness to the myriad ways you unconsciously reject the present moment. Pay close attention to internal tension, unvoiced complaints, and the habitual urge to mentally flee to another time or place. Ask yourself frequently about the nature of your internal landscape. By shining the light of vigilant observation on these patterns, the unconscious automatically begins to dissolve. Consider the subtle resentments you harbor toward your daily tasks or the people around you. This unspoken resistance is not a harmless internal mechanism. It is a toxic emanation that pollutes your own well-being and the collective consciousness. It does not matter whether your grievances feel justified. The simple fact is that by resisting your current reality, you are transforming the present moment into an adversary. To clean up this internal pollution, you must realize that engaging with negative energy only breeds further misery. You are entirely responsible for your internal environment. Dropping this negativity is much like recognizing you are holding a burning coal and simply choosing to open your hand. Once you recognize that these mental reflexes serve no purpose other than to sustain a miserable, false sense of self, you can consciously choose to release them. This is not about suppressing feelings or judging them as evil. Rather, it is a factual acknowledgement that certain emotional states disconnect you from the inherent joy of life. By accepting an emotion when it arises, without feeding it through continuous mental storytelling, you prevent it from dictating your actions. The mind's strategies for avoiding the present are subtle and numerous. Complaining, for instance, is a direct refusal to accept what is. It automatically casts you in the role of a victim. If a situation is truly intolerable, you have 3 sane choices: alter the circumstances, remove yourself from the environment, or unconditionally accept it as it is. Everything else is an exercise in madness. If you choose to act, whether by leaving or changing the situation, do so from a place of clear insight rather than reactive negativity. If fear paralyzes you, bring your complete non-judgmental attention to that fear, breaking its connection to your runaway thoughts. If no action is possible, dropping all internal resistance allows for a state of profound surrender. Surrender is not a passive defeat. It is an immensely powerful state of internal freedom, where the ego's demand for conflict is starved of oxygen. Similarly, the feeling of stress is simply the internal tear caused by physically being in the present while mentally straining to reach the future. You can engage in fast-paced, demanding work without fracturing your consciousness. By fully immersing yourself in the action itself, rather than obsessing over the outcome, the frantic energy of stress transforms into a vibrant, joyful flow. Dwelling excessively on the past, whether clinging to former glories, rehearsing old grievances, or wallowing in guilt, is another mechanism that solidifies a false identity and anchors you in psychological time. Perhaps the most common trap is the perpetual state of waiting. Whether it is a minor irritation in a traffic jam or a lifelong yearning for the perfect relationship, wealth, or enlightenment, waiting essentially means rejecting what you currently have in favor of an imagined future. This mindset ensures that true fulfillment always remains just out of reach. While it is perfectly natural to work toward improving your life circumstances, those external conditions should never be confused with your true life, which is the complete, perfect essence of your being in this exact moment. True prosperity is not a future accumulation of wealth. It is a profound gratitude for the present reality. When you catch your mind slipping into the waiting mode, abruptly bring your focus back to the immediate environment. On your life's journey, it is vital to distinguish between your outer and inner purpose. The outer purpose involves navigating the temporal world, setting goals, achieving milestones, and reaching destinations. However, if this outward trajectory consumes your entire focus, reducing the current step to a mere obstacle to overcome, you entirely miss the inner purpose. The inner purpose is solely concerned with the quality of your awareness in the here and now. It is the vertical deepening of your presence, completely independent of your worldly successes or failures. While every external achievement is ultimately subject to decay and loss, realizing your inner purpose infuses every mundane action with profound beauty and unshakable peace. Many believe they must excavate the deepest layers of their psychological past or analyze their childhood conditioning to find freedom. However, delving endlessly into the past is a bottomless pursuit. The remnants of your past conditioning only matter when they surface in the present as a reaction, an emotion, or a recurring relationship dynamic. You do not need to journey backward in time to heal. By bringing intense, non-judgmental presence to your current reactions and emotional triggers, you effectively dissolve the past right now. The past can only maintain its grip on your life when you are operating in a state of unconscious absence. It cannot survive the brilliant, unwavering light of your conscious presence. Chapter 5. The State of Presence. In Chapter 5, the author explores the profound nature of true awareness, clarifying that presence cannot be comprehended, analyzed, or categorized by the thinking mind. Instead, it is described as an experience of acute, silent alertness and a deep rootedness in the current moment. The text re-evaluates the conventional idea of waiting, shifting it from a familiar state of impatient anticipation for the future to a transformative practice of vigilant, full-bodied attention on the here and now. The author suggests that an individual can only truly perceive beauty, experience lasting inner peace, and connect with pure consciousness when the mind's constant repetitive chatter is finally quieted. By consciously stepping away from the stream of thought and anchoring attention entirely in the present reality, one taps into a deeper, unshakable dimension. This state of profound stillness is likened to a divine reality, often referred to in various spiritual traditions as Christ consciousness or pure presence, which the author posits exists eternally and accessibly within every person, waiting only to be uncovered through the cessation of mental noise. In Chapter 6, the focus shifts to the concept of the inner body as a vital tool for anchoring oneself in the present moment. The author explains that by directing attention away from constant mental chatter and toward the physical sensations within the body, an individual can establish a deeper connection with their true essence, or being. The chapter explores how this continuous practice of inner body awareness offers profound benefits, such as a sense of deep-rootedness, enhanced vitality, and even physical well-being. It also discusses practical ways to maintain this connection in daily life, such as focusing on the breath to quiet the mind and practicing active, full-body listening when interacting with others. Ultimately, the body is presented not as a limitation, but as an essential, accessible bridge to a more profound spiritual reality. Chapter 7. Portals into the unmanifested. To connect with the inner energy of your physical form, it is highly beneficial to transform the process into a dedicated meditative practice. You do not need a vast amount of time. 10 to 15 minutes of focused awareness is generally enough. Begin by ensuring that your environment is free from potential disruptions. Remove any ringing devices and find a space where others will not intrude. Seat yourself comfortably, but maintain an upright posture without leaning heavily against a backrest, as a straight spine naturally promotes mental vigilance. Alternatively, you may adopt whatever seated position you naturally prefer for contemplation. Allow your physical frame to relax completely and gently close your eyes. Draw a series of deep breaths, directing the air all the way down into your lower abdomen. Notice the subtle rhythmic expansion and contraction of this area with every cycle of inhalation and exhalation. Once you are anchored in this rhythm, shift your awareness to the totality of the vital energy field residing within your body. Refrain from analyzing or conceptualizing this energy. Your task is simply to feel it. Through this deliberate shift in focus, you begin to reclaim your consciousness from the incessant chatter of the intellect. If visualization aids your practice, you might imagine a luminous glow suffusing your limbs and organs. However, as the sensation of your inner vitality sharpens into a unified field of life force, it is best to abandon any mental pictures and commit entirely to the raw, direct feeling. As you drop all mental concepts of your physical shape, what remains is an all-encompassing experience of sheer being. In this state, the inner body loses its perceived boundaries. Sink even deeper into this sensation until the division between the observer and the observed melts away. The boundaries separating your internal world from the external environment will dissolve, and the concept of an isolated inner body will vanish. By delving profoundly into your physical form, you effectively transcend it. Rest in this domain of pure existence for as long as you find it comforting. When you are ready, gently return your awareness to your physical senses and your breathing, and open your eyes. Observe the room around you with a quiet, meditative gaze, refraining from assigning names or judgments to the objects you see, while continuing to feel the quiet hum of your inner vitality. Accessing this formless dimension provides profound liberation. It emancipates you from the heavy chains of identifying solely with your physical shape. This state is life in its purest, undifferentiated essence, existing prior to its fracturing into countless separate entities. We can refer to this as the unmanifested, the unseen wellspring of all creation, the fundamental existence breathing life into every living thing. It is a sanctuary of profound tranquility, yet simultaneously pulsating with vibrant, dynamic joy. Whenever you establish true presence, you become slightly transparent to the pure consciousness that radiates from this ultimate source. You come to realize that this luminous awareness is not something external to you, but rather the very core of your identity. In Eastern traditions, there is a concept known as qi, which describes the universal life force flowing through all things. The unmanifested realm is not qi itself. Rather, it is the ultimate origin of qi. Qi represents the dynamic energy field within your physical form. It acts as a transitional bridge connecting your external physical identity with the infinite source. You can think of qi as a river of flowing vitality, When you direct your conscious attention deeply into your inner body, you are essentially swimming upstream along this current, tracing it all the way back to its origin. While qi is characterized by movement and flow, the unmanifested is defined by absolute, motionless tranquility. When you arrive at a state of profound internal silence that still thrums with life, you have moved beyond the inner body and beyond the flow of qi, stepping directly into the source itself. This threshold is the singularity where the material universe dissolves into nothingness, and simultaneously where the unmanifested pours out as the energetic river of qi to construct the physical world. It is the boundary line of birth and death. When your conscious awareness projects outward, the mind and the material world are born. When that same awareness turns inward, it rediscovers its own origin and retreats into the unmanifested. Upon returning your focus to the sensory world, you take up your physical identity once more, complete with a name, a personal history, and a projected future. Yet, in a very crucial way, you are fundamentally changed. You have touched a reality within yourself that transcends the material plane, recognizing that this sacred dimension is inseparable from who you are. Therefore, make it your daily discipline to withhold a portion of your attention from the external world and your relentless thoughts. Keep a fragment of your awareness anchored internally. Continuously feel your inner vitality as you navigate your daily routines, particularly during interactions with others, or when immersed in nature. Keep the gateway open. It is entirely possible to maintain a subtle awareness of the unmanifested dimension throughout your entire life. It will manifest as a profound undercurrent of peace, an unshakable stillness that persists regardless of the chaos unfolding in the external environment. In this state, you serve as a living conduit between the divine and the material plane, between the infinite source and the world of forms. This sustained connection is the very essence of spiritual awakening. Do not mistakenly believe that the unmanifested is a distant, separate realm. It is the hidden essence breathing within every existing form, thoroughly permeating our world. Every night, when you slip into the profound depths of dreamless sleep, you inadvertently travel into the unmanifested. In this phase of rest, you merge completely with the source, drinking in the vital energy required to sustain you when you awaken back into the fragmented world of forms. This energetic nourishment is infinitely more critical for your survival than physical sustenance. However, during dreamless sleep, this merging occurs entirely without your conscious awareness. While your biological systems continue to function, your sense of self dissolves completely. It is nearly impossible to conceptualize what it would be like to maintain full consciousness during dreamless sleep, because that state is entirely devoid of sensory or mental content. The unmanifested dimension cannot bring you true liberation until you enter it with full awareness. The ancient teachings emphasize that truth must be known directly and experientially to bring about freedom. A merely conceptual understanding is insufficient. However, trying to force yourself to remain awake during deep sleep is generally a futile endeavor. At best, you might achieve lucidity within the dream state, which, while intriguing, does not offer ultimate spiritual liberation. Instead, rely on the conscious experience of your inner body as your primary gateway into the unmanifested. Keep this passage open throughout your waking hours to maintain a continuous tether to your divine origin. The physical condition of your body, whether it is youthful, aged, robust, or fragile, is entirely irrelevant to this practice. The inner body exists outside the confines of time. If you struggle to feel this internal vitality, there are other gateways you can utilize, though they all ultimately lead to the exact same destination. The present moment itself serves as the most fundamental gateway. It is the necessary foundation for every other portal, including the practice of inner body awareness. You cannot truly inhabit your physical form unless your attention is intensely anchored in the current instant. Psychological time and the material world are bound together, just as the eternal present is inextricably linked to the unmanifested. By dissolving the illusion of past and future through fierce present moment awareness, you inevitably encounter the unmanifested, both directly and indirectly. Directly, it is felt as the pure, radiant power of your own conscious presence, a state devoid of mental clutter. Indirectly, you begin to perceive this divine essence radiating through the physical world, recognizing the sacredness inherent in every living creature, every flower, and every stone. Another pathway opens when the relentless machinery of thought is finally halted. This can be initiated through simple acts, taking a single, profoundly conscious breath, or gazing at a blossom with such intense, quiet alertness that your mind simply forgets to generate its usual commentary. There are countless methods to carve out a momentary pause in the stream of thought, which is the ultimate goal of all true meditation. Continuous mental chatter locks you within the confines of the material world, acting as an impenetrable veil that hides the formless, timeless divine essence living within you and everything around you. When you are fiercely present, the mind ceases its noise naturally, making the present moment the master key to all spiritual gateways. Surrender, the act of releasing all mental and emotional resistance to your current reality, also functions as a powerful portal. Internal resistance isolates you from your environment, from your fellow human beings, and from your own true nature. It fortifies the ego's illusion of separateness, binding you ever tighter to the world of physical forms. The more entrenched you become in this material identity, the thicker and more impermeable your egoic shell becomes, effectively shutting the door to the profound depths of the unmanifested. However, when you embrace total surrender, your rigid form identity begins to soften and become translucent, allowing the radiant light of the unmanifested to shine clearly through you. It is entirely your choice which portal you utilize to access this hidden dimension. Whether you immerse yourself in the energy of the inner body, anchor yourself fiercely in the present moment, step away from the thinking mind, or practice unconditional surrender to reality, each path is valid. You only need to walk through one. While many assume that love must be one of these gateways, it is not. Rather, once a portal is opened, love naturally arises within you as the profound, experiential realization of your inherent oneness with all creation. Love is the divine light that pours through the open portal into the material world. As long as you remain trapped within the illusion of your separate physical identity, genuine love remains impossible. Your true objective is not to endlessly search the external world for love, but to quiet yourself and open a portal through which love can effortlessly emerge. The unmanifested dimension is not segregated from the physical universe. It permeates everything, yet it remains so perfectly camouflaged that the vast majority of humanity completely overlooks it. If you refine your perception, you will discover it everywhere. A gateway presents itself in every waking second. Consider the distant bark of a dog or the rumble of a passing vehicle. Do not merely listen to the noise itself. Listen for the profound silence out of which that sound emerges and into which it eventually fades. By shifting your focus toward the silence rather than the auditory disturbance, you foster a corresponding stillness within your own mind. A portal begins to pry itself open. Every note of music, every spoken word, and every worldly sound is born from silence and is continually enveloped by it. This underlying quietude is what permits the sound to exist at all. It is the unmanifested expressing itself within the sensory world. This is why mystics have long asserted that nothing in the material realm so closely resembles the divine as pure silence. You need only to shift your attention to notice it. Even in the midst of a lively conversation, you can become acutely aware of the fleeting, silent pauses between words and sentences. As you tune into these quiet gaps, the vastness of your own internal stillness begins to expand. It is impossible to genuinely listen to external silence without your internal landscape becoming deeply tranquil. The silence outside resonates with the stillness inside, drawing you effortlessly into the unmanifested realm. In the same way that sound relies on silence to exist, physical matter fundamentally depends on emptiness, the vast, unoccupied space that allows objects to occupy a location. Every tangible item emerges from nothingness, is surrounded by nothingness, and will eventually dissolve back into nothingness. Furthermore, the illusion of solidity is easily shattered when you examine the microscopic structure of the physical world. Even your own body is composed almost entirely of empty space, with the distances between subatomic particles being astronomically vast compared to the particles themselves. Even within an atom, there is little more than a vibrating frequency residing within a void. Ancient spiritual traditions intuitively grasped this truth millennia ago, recognizing that form is fundamentally emptiness, and emptiness is the essence of all form. The unmanifested reveals itself not only as silence, but also as the boundless space that permeates the cosmos. Yet this spatial emptiness is as easily ignored as silence. We are conditioned to focus exclusively on the objects occupying the room, ignoring the space that accommodates them. When you attempt to analyze or conceptualize this nothingness, you immediately lose its essence, because the mind instinctively tries to convert nothing into something. Space is simply the unmanifested dimension appearing within the parameters of a sense-perceived universe. It is a profound paradox that defies intellectual comprehension. When you consciously withdraw your attention from the material objects filling a room and instead focus on the empty space itself, a profound internal shift occurs. Just as physical space allows material objects to exist, your pure consciousness is the internal space that allows your thoughts and emotions to arise. By ignoring the objects in the room, you simultaneously detach from the objects in your mind. Thinking and the true awareness of space cannot coexist. By contemplating the empty void around you, you awaken the vast, silent consciousness within you. Space and silence are simply external reflections of the infinite creative womb of all existence. To remain ignorant of this dimension is to live entirely out of balance, obsessed with fragile forms and perpetually haunted by fear. Recognizing this inner space connects you to the indestructible divine reality, freeing you from the terror of worldly loss. If existence consisted exclusively of silence, you would have no concept of what silence was. It is the contrast of sound that brings the reality of silence into your awareness. Similarly, if the universe were nothing but a boundless void without a single star or galaxy, space would hold no meaning. If you were a solitary point of consciousness floating in absolute emptiness, there would be no perception of distance, scale, or movement. Space only emerges when the singular source fractures into multiplicity. As the singular divine essence expands into the myriad forms of the universe, space expands alongside it to accommodate this diversity. Before the universe burst into existence, there was no vast, empty container waiting to be populated. There was absolutely nothing, only the unmanifested source. When the source manifested into the physical world, space spontaneously appeared to allow for this multiplicity. When you gaze up at the night sky, the billions of galaxies and the unfathomable distances between them are awe-inspiring. Yet the most magnificent aspect is not the celestial bodies themselves, but the infinite depth and stillness of the void that holds them all. This cosmic emptiness is the externalized body of the divine. The true miracle is that the breathtaking stillness and vastness governing the cosmos is exactly the same dimension that resides within your own being. When you anchor yourself in utter presence, you encounter this exact vastness as the quiet, thoughtless space inside you. Within your consciousness, this dimension is characterized by infinite depth rather than physical distance. Ultimately, both space and time are illusions of the sensory world, but they point toward two vital truths of the divine: infinity and eternity. When you discover the internal equivalence of space and time, which are the stillness of no mind and the fierce presence of the eternal now, the external world continues to function, but it loses its power to imprison you. You realize that the very purpose of the material world is to serve as the mirror through which the unmanifested comes to know itself. Through your awakening, the universe fulfills its ultimate divine objective. Aside from the nightly journey of dreamless sleep, there is one final involuntary gateway into the unmanifested, the moment of physical death. Even if an individual has ignored every spiritual opportunity throughout their life, this ultimate portal flashes open as the biological form perishes. Numerous accounts from those who have survived near-death experiences describe this threshold as an encounter with a radiant, blissful light and an overwhelming sense of peace. This phenomenon is deeply chronicled in esoteric texts as the encounter with one's true, luminous self. However, this gateway remains open only for a fleeting instant. If a person has spent their entire existence heavily identified with their ego and fiercely attached to the sensory world, they will likely recoil from this blinding light in sheer terror. Unprepared for the dissolution of their false identity, they lose consciousness, and the subsequent processes of their spiritual journey unfold involuntarily, typically leading to a repetition of the cycle of suffering. Passing consciously through this final portal does not equate to complete annihilation. While the constructed personality and personal history are stripped away, the radiant true essence of the individual remains perfectly intact. In truth, anything that was ever genuinely real or valuable within a person's character was simply this divine light shining through the cracks of their ego. Facing the end of physical existence is an unparalleled opportunity for ultimate spiritual liberation, an opportunity tragically squandered in societies that refuse to acknowledge the deeper realities of life and death. Every spiritual gateway involves a form of death, the deliberate termination of the false, mind-made self. When you consciously step through any of these portals, you cease deriving your worth and identity from a fragile psychological construct. You suddenly recognize that death itself is an illusion, no more real than the phantom ego you once believed yourself to be. The end of this profound illusion is the only true meaning of death, and it remains a painful, terrifying prospect only as long as you stubbornly cling to the shadows of the material world. Chapter 8. Enlightened Relationships. In this chapter, the text examines the profound dynamics of human connection, exploring how interpersonal relationships frequently become sources of deep suffering due to unconscious, ego-driven demands. The author explains that many romantic attachments are fundamentally addictive rather than rooted in genuine love. They are often driven by an internal sense of lack, where the ego desperately seeks wholeness and salvation through another person. Because external forms can never permanently satisfy this internal void, these connections typically oscillate between intense affection and deep hostility, triggering long-held emotional pain when expectations are inevitably unmet. To transform these volatile, addictive patterns into enlightened relationships, the chapter advises viewing interpersonal challenges not as obstacles, but as vital opportunities for spiritual practice. By remaining intensely anchored in the present moment and bringing non-judgmental awareness to one's own emotional reactions, partners can break free from the cycle of mutual triggering and unconscious drama. The text emphasizes that accepting a partner completely as they are in the present, without the need to change or judge them, is the foundation of true connection. Furthermore, the chapter explores the specific historical and biological experiences of women, suggesting that their direct confrontation with collective and physical pain provides a unique, powerful gateway to achieving sustained conscious presence. The text concludes by asserting that the foundation for any enlightened external relationship requires relinquishing the fragmented, egoic relationship one has with oneself, moving away from duality and into a state of pure, unified being. Chapter 9. Beyond Happiness and Unhappiness. There is peace, the higher good, beyond good and bad. The distinction between happiness and inner peace is profound and essential. Happiness is inherently conditional. It relies entirely on external circumstances being perceived as positive or favorable by the judgmental mind. Inner peace, however, is a deep, abiding state that does not depend on external conditions. It remains undisturbed regardless of what unfolds in the physical world. You might wonder if it is possible to bypass the negative entirely, perhaps by maintaining a strictly positive mindset to attract only favorable situations. Yet the question remains, does the human mind truly comprehend what constitutes a positive or negative event? The perspective of the egoic mind is incredibly limited. Countless individuals have discovered that their most profound awakenings came entirely disguised as limitations, failures, severe illnesses, or devastating losses. These seemingly negative occurrences forced them to abandon superficial, ego-driven ambitions and false self-images, ultimately granting them profound depth, humility, and genuine compassion. When something you label as negative enters your life, it carries a deep, concealed lesson. A sudden illness or an accident can instantly strip away the trivialities of daily existence, laying bare what is genuinely real and what is merely a mental illusion. From a higher vantage point, conditions are neither positive nor negative. They simply are as they are. By living in a state of complete, unconditional acceptance of this isness, which is the only truly sane way to live, the dualistic concepts of good and bad vanish. What emerges is a higher good that encompasses even what the mind would aggressively reject as bad. The mind operates strictly on polarities, good and bad, love and hate, like and dislike. When tragedy strikes, whether it is the death of a loved one or the approach of your own mortality, it is impossible to feel happy. However, you can remain at peace. If you completely relinquish your internal resistance to the painful event, underneath the inevitable sadness and tears, you will discover a profound serenity and a sacred stillness. This is the direct emanation of pure being. It is the peace of God, the ultimate good that possesses no opposite. If the situation permits action, you must certainly do what is necessary, but do so while simultaneously accepting what is. Acceptance liberates you from the mind's tyranny and reconnects you with being. Consequently, your actions will no longer be driven by fear, greed, or the desperate need to defend a fragile sense of identity. An intelligence vastly greater than the intellect takes the helm. Many individuals require an immense burden of suffering before they are finally compelled to relinquish their resistance and embrace forgiveness. When they eventually surrender, a magnificent miracle unfolds. The awakening of consciousness through the very vehicle of apparent evil, transmuting profound suffering into unshakable inner peace. Ultimately, the suffering in this world serves to force humanity into realizing its true identity beyond name and form. Yet this higher good only becomes a reality for you through the act of forgiveness, which means recognizing the insubstantial nature of the past and allowing the present moment to exist exactly as it is. In doing so, you generate a silent, intense field of presence that heals pain and dispels unconsciousness simply through your state of being. The end of your life drama. When you reside in this state of deep acceptance and inner peace, you might wonder if anything bad can still occur. Most of the events people label as bad are actually self-created, or more accurately, ego-created. They are the dramatic narratives of a life run by an unobserved mind. The ego inherently views itself as an isolated fragment in a hostile universe, constantly threatened by other egos. To combat this deep-seated fear and sense of lack, the ego relies heavily on resistance, control, power, and conflict. Whenever egos interact, drama inevitably ensues, be it in personal relationships or on a global scale through war and exploitation. Furthermore, the ego's perpetual mental resistance creates severe energetic blockages in the body, often manifesting as physical illness. When you reconnect with your deeper being and step out of the mind's control, you cease to manufacture this drama. You no longer participate in it. Even if you are entirely alone, the ego can generate its own internal drama through self-pity, guilt, or anxiety. Whenever you fail to honor the present moment, you are actively creating psychological time, which is the very fabric of drama. Most people are deeply infatuated with their personal life dramas. Their story forms their entire identity, and what they fear more than anything is the conclusion of this narrative. As long as they believe they are their minds, they are terrified of their own awakening. Living in complete acceptance of the present moment spells the definitive end of all drama. In this state of pure consciousness, you become utterly incapable of engaging in conflict. An argument requires identification with a mental position and a reactive resistance to an opposing view, which serves only to energize the polarities of the unconscious mind. You can still express your perspective with absolute clarity and firmness, but it will carry no reactive force, no defensive posture, and no aggressive attack. You are at one with yourself, and therefore no internal clash exists between the expectations of the mind and the reality of the present. Impermanence and the cycles of life. While you inhabit this physical dimension, you remain intimately subject to its cyclical nature and the universal law of impermanence. Everything in the realm of form is unstable and in constant flux. However, you no longer perceive these cycles as bad. They simply are. By embracing the isness of all things, a deeper dimension reveals itself, an abiding presence, an unchanging stillness, and an uncaused joy that exists far beyond the mind's narrow definitions of good and bad. This is the joy of being. On the level of form, there is a continuous dance of birth and death, creation and destruction, growth and dissolution. This is evident everywhere, in the life of a star, a flower, a civilization, and the inevitable cycles of success and failure in a human life. There are periods when things thrive and come to you effortlessly, followed by periods when they wither and fall away to make room for new growth or transformation. If you stubbornly cling to a disappearing condition and resist the downward cycle, you are refusing to move with the natural flow of life, and suffering is the guaranteed result. The mind insists that the upward cycle is good and the downward cycle is bad, but growth cannot continue indefinitely without becoming monstrous and destructive. Dissolution is absolutely necessary for new creation. The downward cycle is often a vital prerequisite for spiritual realization. A profound failure, a deep loss, or an acute pain is frequently what forcefully draws an individual toward the spiritual dimension. In the world of form, every achievement ultimately crumbles, and everyone experiences failure. You can certainly continue to create and enjoy new forms and circumstances, but you will no longer seek your identity or sense of self-worth within them. When a condition you once valued inevitably changes or vanishes, you will not feel as though a vital limb has been torn away. The Buddha recognized that even worldly happiness contains the seed of suffering because it is inherently impermanent. Relying on transient things for lasting fulfillment is a guaranteed recipe for despair. When you cease demanding that people, places, and situations provide a salvation they cannot possibly offer, life begins to flow with incredible ease. Things you once thought you needed for happiness will come to you without struggle, and you can freely appreciate them while they last, entirely devoid of the fear of loss. You recognize that all worldly things are fleeting, but your inner dependency is gone. Even if your entire world were to collapse and turn to dust, you would maintain a deep core of peace. You might not feel happy, but you will undoubtedly be at peace. Using and relinquishing negativity. All internal resistance manifests as negativity, ranging from mild irritation and impatience to blind rage and suicidal despair. The ego operates under the delusion that this negativity is an effective tool for manipulating reality, believing that unhappiness can somehow secure a desired outcome or dissolve an undesirable one. Yet, negativity is entirely counterproductive. It actively prevents positive conditions from arising and locks negative situations firmly in place. Its only actual function is to fortify the ego's false sense of identity, which is precisely why the ego clings to it so desperately. Once identified with a negative state, the mind unconsciously resists positive change, fearing it would destroy the established identity of being a victim or a sufferer. Negativity is a psychic pollutant, utterly unnatural to the essence of life. No other species on Earth experiences this kind of neurotic resistance. It is an affliction exclusive to the human mind. When you observe a plant or an animal, you witness a perfect surrender to the present moment. They do not manufacture problems out of living and dying. When ducks engage in a brief territorial scuffle, they quickly separate, flap their wings vigorously to release the excess energy, and swim on as if nothing occurred, carrying no lingering resentment or mental narrative of the event. If you find yourself experiencing a recurring negative emotion, treat it not as a failure, but as a vital, blaring signal demanding your conscious presence. It is a wake-up call urging you to step out of your mind and into the now. Do not attempt to suppress the feeling or turn away from it in denial. Instead, bring the full, piercing light of your conscious attention to the emotion. Acknowledge its presence without labeling it mentally or building a dramatic story around it. By simply witnessing the resistance, you will realize it serves absolutely no purpose. This intense, non-judgmental presence dissolves the unconsciousness that fuels the negativity, leaving you in a state of clear, vibrant awareness. The nature of compassion. When you transcend the mind's dualities, you become like a profoundly deep lake. The surface of your life may experience turbulence and storms, mirroring the shifting seasons and cycles of the external world. However, deep down, the core of the lake remains absolutely undisturbed. You identify with the entirety of the lake, firmly rooted in its silent, unmoving depths. Because your fulfillment is no longer chained to the constantly fluctuating forms of the outer world, you are free to enjoy and appreciate them without desperate attachment. This profound detachment does not make you cold or remote from your fellow human beings. In fact, true connection is utterly impossible until you are rooted in being. When you operate from the mind, you only interact with the mental and physical forms of others, forming superficial attachments based on fleeting likes and dislikes. But when you are anchored in being, you look beyond the fragile screen of the body and mind to perceive the radiant immortal essence within another person. When faced with someone's suffering or deeply unconscious behavior, your intense presence allows you to see past their egoic shell and recognize their pure being. Compassion holds a dual nature. On one hand, you share a profound physical vulnerability and mortality with every other living creature. You recognize that all physical forms are fleeting, destined to dissolve into nothingness. This is a deeply humbling realization that leaves no room for arrogance and establishes total equality among all beings. Yet, the other side of compassion is the deep, experiential realization of the deathless dimension, the immortal divine presence that constitutes your true nature and the true nature of all others. True compassion occurs when the heavy sadness of shared mortality merges completely with the joyous realization of eternal life, transmuting into a profound, healing peace. Toward a different order of reality. The belief that the physical body must be preserved indefinitely to conquer death is an illusion born of the egoic mind. The body and death are two inseparable sides of the same coin. You cannot eliminate one without relinquishing the other. The body is merely a limited, distorted perception of your true nature, yet it is the necessary portal through which you must pass to realize the formless divine. The world as it currently exists is largely a symbolic reflection of the collective egoic mind, a reality heavily dominated by fear and deep-seated negativity. However, as more individuals awaken from the heavy delusion of form and reconnect with the unmanifested, A profound shift in planetary consciousness is occurring. You do not achieve ultimate salvation by fighting to create a better world on the level of physical form. Instead, you must first awaken from the dream of form entirely. Once you are rooted securely in the eternal and no longer desperately need the world to fulfill you or grant you an identity, you become truly capable of transforming it. Your greatest contribution to the world is your state of being. When you are deeply present, you emanate a vast, undisturbed peace that effortlessly dissolves discord and unconsciousness in everyone you encounter. You heal at the level of cause rather than merely addressing superficial symptoms. While this does not preclude taking compassionate action to alleviate physical suffering, like feeding the hungry, the ultimate healing occurs in the profound, shared space of conscious being. To focus exclusively on fighting the endless effects of unconsciousness without addressing the root cause will only lead to exhaustion and despair. You cannot fight darkness, you can only introduce light. By making the causal level of pure presence your primary focus, your very existence becomes a profound teaching, and your unshakable peace becomes your ultimate gift to a world desperately in need of transformation. Chapter 10. The Meaning of Surrender. Acceptance of the Now. To the unobserved mind, the concept of surrender often carries a heavy, negative connotation. The ego interprets it as a fatalistic defeat, a weak resignation to the harsh circumstances of life, or a sudden loss of the motivation required to initiate positive change. Yet, true surrender is something entirely different. It is not a passive, lethargic yielding to whatever miserable life situation you might find yourself in. It does not mean abandoning your plans or ceasing to take action. Rather, surrender is the profound, ancient wisdom of yielding to the continuous flow of life rather than desperately swimming against its current. Because the only place this flow can ever be experienced is in the present moment, surrender is ultimately the unconditional, unreserved acceptance of the now. To surrender is to deliberately drop all internal resistance to what is. Inner resistance manifests as a rigid refusal of reality, an automatic mental judgment, and a subsequent wave of emotional negativity. This resistance flares up most fiercely when things appear to go wrong, when a painful gap opens between the stubborn expectations of your mind and the reality of the present situation. It is precisely in these difficult moments that surrender must be practiced if you are to cleanse your life of manufactured sorrow. Surrender is an entirely internal phenomenon. By unconditionally accepting the internal reality of this exact moment, you are instantly freed from the tyranny of the mind and reconnected with the vastness of being. This internal acceptance does not mean that you are paralyzed on the external level. You are not required to accept a universally undesirable life situation. If you find yourself deeply stuck in the mud, you do not simply cross your arms and declare that you resign yourself to the mud. Resignation is a grim mental position. Surrender is a state of grace. You fully acknowledge that you wish to escape the mud, but you narrow your total attention to the present instant, carefully avoiding the trap of labeling it as bad or unfair. By refusing to judge the now, you eliminate the emotional negativity and the frantic internal resistance. You simply accept the isness of the moment, and then you take whatever physical action is necessary to extract yourself. Action taken from this state of clear, non-judgmental presence is immensely powerful. It is not the frantic, thrashing action born of anger or despair. It is a focused, positive movement driven by the deep intelligence of being. Imagine walking along a treacherous path at night, enveloped in a blinding fog. You hold a powerful flashlight that cuts through the mist, illuminating a small, clear space immediately in front of your feet. The fog represents your life situation, burdened by the heavy conceptual weight of the past and the future. The flashlight is your conscious presence, and the brightly lit space is the now. When you refuse to surrender, your egoic shell hardens. You become an isolated, vulnerable fragment in a hostile universe, constantly driven by a paranoid need to defend yourself, dominate others, and battle nature itself. Your physical body reflects this mental contraction, becoming tense and rigid, effectively strangling the free flow of vital life energy. Surrender breaks this shell. It softens your psychological and physical form, allowing the timeless, indestructible reality of your being to emerge. When your actions are infused with this surrendered energy, the very concept of work transforms into a joyful, effortless celebration of life. From mind energy to spiritual energy. Letting go of this deeply ingrained resistance requires vigilant self-observation. The process begins simply by acknowledging that the resistance is present. You must be there, acting as the silent watcher the moment the tension arises. Observe the precise mechanics of the mind as it scrambles to attach negative labels to a situation, to a person, or to yourself. Watch the thought process unfold and actively feel the heavy, uncomfortable energy of the resulting emotion. By witnessing this internal machinery in the light of full awareness, its sheer futility becomes glaringly obvious. You cannot maintain conscious presence and simultaneously harbor profound unhappiness. Negativity and suffering are the unmistakable symptoms of internal resistance, and resistance thrives exclusively in the dark soil of unconsciousness. You might protest that you are acutely aware of your miserable feelings, but simply wallowing in an emotion is not the same as being conscious of it. To dwell on a negative state, to feed it with a continuous stream of compulsive, repetitive thinking, is to be entirely identified with it. The unhappy emotion is sustained solely by the continuous injection of psychological time. If you sever its lifeblood by anchoring your awareness fiercely in the present moment, the negativity cannot survive. Until you master surrender, the spiritual dimension remains a mere intellectual concept, a comforting philosophy to read about or debate. It only blossoms into a living, breathing reality when the resistance is dropped. In that state, the energy that animates your actions shifts dramatically. The world is currently dominated by mind energy, a harsh, polarizing force responsible for the rigid structures of our civilization, perpetuating endless cycles of conflict, pollution, and suffering. Through surrender, you act as a conduit for spiritual energy. This energy recognizes no polarities. It is a healing, unified force that brings no harm to the earth or its inhabitants. It operates on an entirely different order of reality, waiting to transform the world the moment humanity chooses to lay down its internal weapons. Surrender in personal relationships. When you live in a state of surrender, your interactions with others are fundamentally altered. You may encounter individuals entirely cut off from their own being who unconsciously attempt to manipulate or control you to siphon your energy. It is crucial to understand that while an unconscious person will try to manipulate, only an unconscious person can be successfully manipulated. If you react to their aggression with your own defensive resistance, you are instantly dragged down into their level of unconsciousness. Surrender does not imply that you become a passive victim to abusive behavior. You can absolutely say a firm, uncompromising no to a person, or walk away from a toxic environment while maintaining a state of total internal non-resistance. This no does not stem from a place of fearful reaction or aggressive anger. It arises from a deep, clear insight into what is required in the moment. It is a clean action, free from the psychic pollution of negativity. If you find yourself in a deeply oppressive situation that you cannot physically escape, such as a prison, you are faced with the ultimate choice: bondage or inner freedom. You can resist and suffer, or you can surrender and find an unshakable inner peace that external walls cannot contain. In personal relationships, a lack of surrender transforms the other person into a mere means to an end, a vehicle for your own egoic gratification. The next time you find yourself entangled in a bitter argument, carefully observe the violent surge of energy behind your desperate need to be right. Acknowledge the intense attachment to your mental position. Once you bring the light of consciousness to this aggressive posture, you suddenly realize you have a choice. In the middle of the conflict, you can consciously choose to drop the reaction. This does not mean feigning a superior, condescending agreement. It means genuinely letting go of the internal emotional energy field that was violently fighting for dominance. When you truly relinquish this identification, a profound lightness and peace sweep through you. Without your resistance to push against, your partner's mental position loses its aggressive fuel, and the space for genuine communication finally opens. This is the esoteric truth behind the martial arts philosophy of yielding to overcome. True non-resistance is an actionless activity, a state of intense, alert presence that acts as a profound healer. The ego erroneously believes that its survival depends on raising shields and fighting back, mistaking its rigid defenses for strength. In truth, this resistance completely severs you from the only source of genuine power, your being. By dropping the masks, dropping the defenses, and becoming utterly simple and vulnerable, you step out of the frantic counterfeit roles of human interaction and discover a permanent, unassailable invulnerability, transforming illness into enlightenment. When faced with a severe physical ailment, the concept of surrender might seem to contradict the very will to survive. However, surrendering to illness does not mean resigning yourself to death. It requires a radical shift in how you perceive the condition, An illness is a component of your broader life situation. It possesses a history and an imagined, often terrifying, future. But underneath the temporary conditions of your life situation is your life itself, your eternal being anchored in the timeless now. In the exact parameters of the present instant, there is no abstract concept of illness. When a physician attaches a heavy medical label to your condition, your mind immediately constructs a solid, terrifying reality around it, projecting it endlessly into the future. To surrender is to strip away the label and the timeline. You withdraw all psychological time from the condition. You narrow your focus exclusively to this very second and ask yourself what is actually happening. You might find physical pain, weakness, or discomfort. That raw sensory data is all you are required to surrender to. You do not surrender to the terrifying narrative of the illness. Allow the intense discomfort to violently force your attention away from the mental narrative and into the fiercely alert present moment. Surrender does not directly magically cure the physical body, but it fundamentally transforms you. When you are transformed, your relationship with the world is altered. If you attack the reality of your condition with anger, guilt, or a sense of bitter unfairness, you are merely fighting a reflection in a mirror. That resistance pollutes your inner space and traps you in suffering. By accepting the precise physical reality of the moment without the burden of the mind's tragic storytelling, you become an alchemist, transmuting the heavy base metal of physical suffering into the pure, radiant gold of conscious enlightenment. When disaster strikes, for the vast, unconsciously drifting majority of humanity, it often takes a catastrophic limit situation to shatter the hardened shell of the ego. A limit situation occurs when a sudden disaster, a profound loss, or a devastating upheaval tears your world apart, rendering your previous life entirely meaningless. It is an abrupt, uninvited encounter with death, whether physical or psychological. In the face of such overwhelming devastation, the egoic mind, which painstakingly constructed your former reality, completely collapses. From the smoking ashes of this profound destruction, a new dimension of consciousness can emerge. This transformation is not guaranteed. If a person responds to the disaster by intensifying their bitter resistance to what is, their experience becomes a rapid descent into unimaginable hell. However, for many, the situation becomes so intensely unbearable that the mind's frantic attempts to escape into the past or the future completely fail. Trapped in the agonizing reality of the present, they are violently forced into an unconditional acceptance of the unacceptable. In these desperate moments, on death row or at the bedside of a dying loved one, the sheer magnitude of the suffering forces total surrender. This surrender breaks off massive fragments of the egoic shell, allowing the blinding radiance of the unmanifested to shine through. Whenever absolute disaster strikes, stripping away your fortune, your identity, or your health, recognize the profound, hidden grace within it. You are standing on the precipice of an incredible spiritual alchemy. The singular step required to transmute that devastating pain into divine gold is surrender. It will not suddenly make you happy, for happiness is a shallow, conditional state. But it will transmute your terror and agony into a fathomless, radiant peace, an absolute, unshakable certainty of your own indestructible immortality, transforming suffering into peace. There are moments of such acute, unimaginable agony, such as the sudden loss of a child, where the very idea of surrender seems offensive, unnatural, and deeply inhuman. In the immediate shock of such a tragedy, accepting the external reality of the now may be entirely impossible. Yet, the universe always provides a second profound opportunity for surrender. If you find it impossible to accept the horrific external facts of your situation, you must turn inward and surrender to your internal condition. Do not attempt to fight the agonizing pain. Do not seek refuge in the countless pseudo-escapes the world offers, numbing yourself with alcohol, drugs, frantic work, or projecting your rage onto others. These methods never extinguish the suffering, they merely drive it into the unconscious, where it secretly contaminates your entire life and magnetizes further tragedy. Instead, you must face the darkness directly. Allow the grief, the overwhelming despair, the sheer terror, and the bottomless loneliness to exist within you. Witness this agony without allowing the mind to weave a victim narrative around it. Embrace the raw emotion with the full, intense flame of your conscious attention. At first, stepping directly into the core of your suffering may feel like walking into a terrifying abyss. But as you hold your attention there, feeling the pain with every cell of your body rather than thinking about it, you bring the brilliant light of presence into the darkness. Without knowing it, you have surrendered. You have brought the timeless power of the now into the pain, and no resistance can survive that light. This willing descent into the depths of your suffering is a conscious entry into death. Once you have died this egoic death, the illusion shatters, and the resurrection of your true, indestructible being follows. The way of the cross. Throughout history, countless mystics and spiritual seekers have claimed to find the divine through periods of immense, unbearable suffering. The Christian tradition refers to this as the way of the cross. Strictly speaking, it was not the suffering itself that revealed the divine, for suffering is born entirely of resistance. Rather, it was the sheer, crushing weight of the suffering that eventually forced them into a state of total surrender. When the pain becomes intolerable, the mind, the false master and the architect of resistance, finally breaks. The relentless judgment and the bitter refusal of reality dissolve. In that sudden, profound emptiness, the realm of being is unveiled. A vast, unfathomable stillness rises from the depths, bringing with it an uncaused joy and an all-encompassing love. You do not truly find God in this state, for the very word God implies a separate entity hiding somewhere in the universe. Instead, you realize God as being itself, the very essence of your own existence. The way of the cross is the ancient path of reversal. It dictates that the most horrific, agonizing experience of your life, your personal crucifixion, becomes the ultimate catalyst for your salvation. It violently forces the ego to die, leaving only the pure, formless presence of the divine. For the vast, unconscious majority of the world, this brutal path remains the only way they will ever awaken. But there is another way. Enlightenment consciously chosen means deliberately relinquishing your desperate attachment to psychological time and actively saying yes to the present moment. By surrendering willingly, you no longer require the brutal whip of suffering to guide you home. The power to choose. When observing individuals trapped in vicious cycles of abuse, addiction, or perpetual misery, it is common to wonder why they continually choose such suffering. However, the concept of choice implies a high degree of conscious presence. Without presence, there is absolutely no choice. Until an individual successfully disidentifies from the relentless machinery of their mind, they are operating in a state of profound spiritual unconsciousness. They are entirely compelled to act, react, and suffer according to the rigid programming of their past. The conditioned mind is terrified of the unknown, the vibrant, unpredictable expanse of the present moment. It infinitely prefers the familiar, even if the familiar is agonizing. Thus, a person might unconsciously recreate a toxic, abusive dynamic because it aligns perfectly with a childhood script that dictates they are unworthy and deserving of punishment. The pain body actively seeks situations that will generate the negative emotional fuel it requires to survive. This is a severe dysfunction, a form of collective insanity, but it is not a conscious choice. Telling someone in the grip of this unconsciousness that they have chosen their misery is deeply unhelpful. It merely reinforces their identification with the mind that is torturing them. Instead of judging them, the only sane response is profound compassion. To help them, you must teach them how to step outside the mind, how to feel the inner body, and how to anchor themselves in the now. Only when the light of presence pierces the dense fog of their conditioning do they finally gain the power to choose. This realization radically transforms the concept of forgiveness. When you understand that every unconscious action, whether committed by your parents, your enemies, or yourself, was entirely dictated by a conditioned mind devoid of true choice, all resentment instantly evaporates. You realize that no past action, no matter how horrific, possesses the power to touch the eternal, radiant essence of your true self. When you surrender fully to the present, the heavy burden of the past dissolves into nothingness. You will know you have truly surrendered when the obsessive need to ask if you have surrendered completely falls away, leaving only the silent, unbroken peace of the eternal now.